We went from a single pilot dashboard company to an enterprise workflow management tool company where we want to facilitate larger enterprise companies that are looking for an ERP solution to their overall drone solution.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello everyone, this is Randy Goers and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 250. How can enterprise companies better manage their drone operations? For that question, we turn to Uzayr Siddiqui, founder and CEO of Drone Entry. Drone Entry is a venture-backed drone startup that provides an online platform software as a tool. The tool provides enterprise companies with a management system to effectively communicate with their team of pilots and their client. Drone Entry also helps drone pilots build their career and build their credibility with other stakeholders in the industry. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Uzayr talks about the Drone Entry platform and how the company pivoted from a drone-centric business to focus on serving the growing enterprise business sector. But before we hear from Uzayr, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to droneradioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. So let's learn how one company is serving the enterprise business sector with Uzayr Siddiqui of Drone Entry. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Uzayr to introduce himself.
My name is Uzayr. Last name is Siddiqui, the founder and CEO at Drone Entry.
Uzayr, what is Drone Entry?
So Drone Entry obviously started off as a single pilot dashboard credential aggregator or credential tracker for single pilots. And we were trying to really emphasize on how do we showcase the strengths of each individual pilots and their specialities in specific areas that they excel at while they perform their piloting services across their different industries. So our dashboard was really built for that matter, just to begin with.
Why did you feel there was a need for that?
Just about 3 years ago, drones was the big thing and everybody was trying to get on it. So any single person, individual who had access to Best Buy could go and buy a drone and start providing services to anyone who was really looking for it. So that sort of set the problem in many ways for both sides of the story, where you were pronouncing yourself as a pilot while the other individual who was getting the services didn't really know what to really expect from the pilot. So for us, it was about trying to help them communicate and differentiate between a good pilot and a pilot that needs to potentially build his skill set.
What does someone have to do to begin documenting their credentials?
Basically, filling up your basic information. Nothing really gets stopped. We have actually worked with a third party that helps you verify your ID as a person first before we verify you as a true pilot. So that way we keep everything authentic. After that, the next step, you basically start building your history of performance, that you have done projects in certain areas. So it could be any kind of service that you have performed before commercially. But we've also allowed non-commercial pilots to come on board and share their portfolio. And try to stay away from the word portfolio now because it's been a little confusing for a lot of folks out in the industry. So we facilitate credential sharing between different stakeholders on the platform. And it is as easy as uploading your data from different API partners that we are working with. And we're trying to do this automatically. So that way everything is a free flow of information that can and cannot be shared.
So it's like creating an online resume of their work.
2 years ago when we got started, that's how we presented ourselves to the industry folks. And although that still is the idea, but that's become a subcomponent to our overall vision right now.
So tell us how the vision changed and why.
Yes, it was all due to the fact of how the industry was turning. So we had to basically provide value to that industry. The way we saw was after the single pilots aroma came around and went away, we went off to looking at a lot of these drone service companies that were coming up, where a group of drone pilots were getting together and starting the drone service companies. With that, a lot of companies have formed to the intention of providing services to other larger enterprise stakeholders. And now, fast moving forward, we are at the place where right now, for the past 2 years, I can't really put a proper timeline, but that's probably what it looks like. Enterprise companies, larger pipeline, mining, construction, decided that instead of using a drone service company, we will just create our own. In those waves of pivots and changes that the industry kind of took, we went from a single pilot dashboard company to an enterprise workflow management tool company, where we want to facilitate larger enterprise companies that are looking for an ERP solution to their overall drone solution. With the changes that came about, there are a lot of UTM companies, Randy, I'm sure you probably interviewed a couple of them. And there were a lot of data processing software companies that are well renowned out there, Drone Deploy, Pix4D, you name it. So for us to find the niche in overall of this, I'd try to work with the ecosystem is what our vision was. Is how do we facilitate the stakeholders while we work with the ecosystem and provide the value prop to the stakeholders? And the stakeholders in turn became the enterprise companies. So at this point and right now, where we stand is basically providing a workflow management tool for larger enterprise companies and even smaller size businesses that are looking to find that ERP solution to their overall drone management.
Going back to the UTM providers, how does your system integrate with them?
So UTM providers have started so some of them have their open third-party APIs that they're working with different industry partners. What makes our partnership with them unique is our focus has been pilots from the very get-go. Pilots was the first focus for us, and they still are. So when a UTM company does provide zoning of projects, on our dashboard, we know exactly the skill force that the pilot has in a specific airspace zone. And that's the information we are able to track based with our partnership with these UTM companies. And I think when an enterprise company decides to create a project, they will have to get their approval done before they even begin a project. And I think through the credential information of the pilot, we can make that process much faster. And that's why the experience is such an important part of it. With the lands, that has become the biggest topic of the past 2 years, is having and being able to change between the lands providers is something that I think every platform should do. And since we are not a lands provider, we don't really have to be biased towards one. The reason it's not biased is because we want to provide the best value to the customer at the best geographic location where they are. If they are in US, AirMap Kitty Hawk, or any other company, and if they are in England, then Altitude Angel, Horizon, there's multiple of these other UTM companies that could potentially provide their UTM services based on their geographic location. So for us, it's about being agnostic. For us, the focus is the project. Where is the project being done? What are the compliance related to that? And then looking to work with those specific API partners, providing those API partners to the customer. So it makes the flow much easier for the user.
How are companies using the software?
We saw that the industry where we are at right now, these larger construction companies, mining companies that we're working with, are very used to an ERP solution, the enterprise resource management solution, but nothing like that really exists by itself. For us as a unique prop, we aren't doing any data processing. We're actually working with different data processing softwares and UTM companies. So what makes us unique is we don't really push for a specific enterprise companies to use a specific UTM. They could be agnostic to using any type of UTM company based on where they are in the world, or any data processing software, but they can integrate with our tool to manage the data, manage the daily tasks, manage the specific roles of each pilot, manage the time of each pilot, track who's doing what, when, and how, giving and helping with an aim to help enterprise companies improve their return of investment and productivity, because that's sort of what every enterprise company is looking for when they try to adopt a new software or this new market that, you're flying mobiles here, but we just don't know the return of investment. So for us, the pivot was to obviously provide this workflow compliance tool, keep things in order for these large enterprise companies where they have to manage multiple teams, doing multiple types of projects within one big project, or dealing with different subcontractors and dealing with that and sending information, communicating with the subcontractors, so on and so forth.
The system is comprised of 4 modules. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, the 4 modules are basically the pilot management or pilot dashboard. that does the whole auditing on the pilot, keeps everything in check, and their portfolio within that, so that the manager can actually find and track each of the pilot's portfolio in terms of their performance. So from previous pilot dashboard, we've kind of made that a sub product into our larger enterprise product. The next one is a project management, where you are able to assign tasks within the project, subtask within the project of this big, large project. So multiple project handling, multiple pilots working on same projects, keeping track of that information, all that is in there. And the next one, that is the paper management. Now, I know compliance has been the biggest topic, or we've known as being the biggest topic since we have had regulations come up and about in Canada as well as US now. So compliance became something very important. So every paperwork that is part of the project can be tracked. What we've done is we've taken it to another step. Because we're from Canada, we don't like paper, physical paper. We're more digitally more aware. So we've actually added a digitization of the paper, where you can get electronically signed documents by the phone app that we're working on as well, but also through your web app as well, where you can get any document that you upload can be electronically signed, just to keep things fast-paced, where the pilots can focus on actually flying the drone and getting the data that they need, than to focus on who signed the paper and keeping track of that information. So we kind of facilitate all that. And the last one is the client management, the fourth module. This one in particularly was something we saw as a well-renowned pain point across. Emails are the best way that has been used by a lot of enterprise companies that we've talked to, but we've seen that they would prefer if they could provide them with instant updates while the project's going on, status updates while the project's going on if needed be, and have a control on what information gets shared with the client at what time. And all that is something that we've facilitated through our client module, where you can not only just manage your client, but also your communication with the client. And how can you provide them with potentially SMS notifications to the manager at the client level if needed be. So those are the variations that we've been kind of playing with to see where and how specific feature could be a fix for the pain point that these larger enterprise companies are dealing with. So yeah, in overall, those are the four modules that we're focusing on while we are working with the other industry partners that help you process your data.
Does the software still rate the progress of pilots as they perform missions?
Yes. So coming back to our original solution that we had built, we wanted to keep that as a proponent to the drone manager who might be looking at the various different pilots' performance. So we provide a data analytics tool within the dashboard for these drone managers to kind of check the performance. And then, the basic idea is to keep track of the telemetry data and perform our algorithms that we've built within our team.
For companies that have a large drone fleet, how is the data managed?
Because we don't have an app built to have live flight logs uploaded, we've kind of looked at this from a different point of view in a solution. Every time you run a project on, let's say, for Drone Deploy, and you're a pilot that you have created a project on Drone Deploy, you could synchronize the data from Drone Deploy to our dashboard. So we've actually partnered up with Drone Deploy, and we have our app on their app market now, where you're able to sync the data of each of your projects onto our dashboard. So seamlessly, if you're using Pix4D or any other, I don't want to go through all the drone softwares out there, but we're trying to make this flow of data much more easier. So not only your flight logs, but your project information, not the images, everything stays with the actual processing company, but the project information will be synced along with the flight logs onto our dashboard, so the drone manager can actually know exactly what software was used and what kind of project and when it was done.
Do you still see yourself as an individual pilot support company, or have you fully transitioned to the enterprise model?
I think it would be the latter, the enterprise now. We've seen the changes. We've seen the larger enterprise companies that are coming into the play. We've seen our own partners and other market stakeholders that are looking at. And I think after the drone program release, that was, I think 2018, all of 2018 was all about drone programs. We saw that a lot of these enterprise companies struggled with productivity tracking or even return of investment. I think PrecisionHawk came out with the research just recently where they mentioned about a good percentage of them, or 25%, I believe, you might want to reference check that, but cannot find return of investment on their drone programs. And that is what got us thinking as a team, where is that truly they're having a problem, and that is with managing their own drone programs, is not being able to know the actual value prop when they adopt drones itself.
What are some of the challenges in working with enterprise operations?
So we've been doing a lot of pilots to kind of understand each different verticals, because for us as a startup, it was a challenge to actually figure out where each these vertical companies are actually struggling with. And each of them had either the problem at the starting of actually figuring out what drone to use, or it was after they had got the data and what to do with the data. And that was usually the problem. Mining was one of them, because we've seen larger mining companies have close to 100 pilots, and each of them have satellite offices across the world. And usually they don't have multiple drone managers, but they have a handful of them that manage about 100 pilots. So there's no sense of communication between them. The existing SAP tools do not integrate with drone softwares. Usually in the construction world, you have a lot of ERP softwares out there that they're used to using, but they couldn't fit that into the drone space because we're so new that we didn't really have an ERP solution out there. So we've seen those verticals across, so mining, construction, pipeline, to the extent we're trying to still look at it. Safety, I would say police and safety, or what's the other word that's used in the industry?
Emergency management?
Emergency management, yeah. So for them, it was about trying to figure out how many fleets they had, where exactly was the crash, if there was a crash, and how much of the square foot was destroyed if there was a fire, how many pilots are going to be sent over there, such kind of management, more than just having profiles on there, and then really tracking on who's doing what and which pilot is really onto that mission right now. Those are the scenarios that we're looking at and trying to figure out the challenges that they had. And every vertical, Randy, was something we had to work with to kind of figure out. And we're still learning. We're still learning because 2020 has a lot of things to bring.
What has this experience taught you about working with and serving enterprise companies?
Some of them have been running business for 25 years plus 50 years, some even more than 100 years, because they're such large corporations owned by private equity and they have umbrellas of companies under them sometimes. It's sort of hard to give them an advice, but rather I think coming from a new industry space, I would say if they see a value prop and a solution out there, they should try to reduce the procurement process. That is one thing I despise, is the procurement process, because you put into the same regular procurement process of trying to close contracts with them will take about almost 12 months sometimes, and it's just that's a lot of time for a startup. And when startups like us are coming up with new solutions, we don't come up with them every year. We come up with them every other month and try to improvise on certain things. But if they run their procurement process on us, just like they do with their other larger clients, it just doesn't work with us. And that's the problem we have sometimes is we would love to close as soon as possible so we can know exactly what your problem is. But if we are put in the same procurement long luring cycles, it just burns us out. That's just impossible. That's just one thing that comes to my mind right now. And I think being open to new technology is probably the best thing they can do, because, for the past, I think, almost 5 years now, I think a lot of industries have gone down, or a lot of companies have gone down, is because they haven't really adopted to new technology. So yeah, shorter procurement cycles and adoption of new technology as fast as possible.
Is this your first startup?
I have been part of a few endeavors before. However, this is my first startup that I built from ground up, bootstrapping, VC raise, and angels getting involved, and the whole cycle of building a startup from the ground. So yeah, it's my first one.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
What really matters is, I think, being true to yourself. I know this is a very generic, non-drone advice, but rather I think being true to yourself and what you build. I think being as transparent as possible with everybody you deal with while you build something with a team, because again, in the end, team is really your product. And yeah, there's a lot of noise out there that I see. So I think eliminating the noise is one thing. But in the end, it's all about being true to yourself while you're building something.
Things are different today than when you started your company 3 years ago. But when you look at the industry, is it a good time to start a new business?
It's just really based on the experience that the entrepreneur is coming with. Right now, flying taxis, flying mobility, autonomous vehicles, autonomous, drone technology is still something up and coming. And I think if an entrepreneur decides to go that route of building something extensively new for the ecosystem rather than against the ecosystem, then there's definitely a chance. But if somebody's building another drone service or another asset management company, because there's already 20 of those, just don't think it would be fun to do. Because in the end, it all really matters is when you're building all these things, it should be fun. Otherwise, it's just another thing that you're stretching out for no reason. Because, you have so much grit in yourself to kind of push yourself when you're building something, right? I would say definitely look at flying cars if that's where they want to get into the drone space, or, autonomous drone technology that doesn't exist yet.
What's been one of your high points?
So this was exactly end of 2017, where we spent about 8 months to coming up with the pilot dashboard. And for us, we knew for a fact that to build credibility, we needed to get involved in the industry publicly, and we need to get involved through an accelerator, which will give us a push. So we had applied to an accelerator in Hong Kong called Bring.io, and we're still in touch with our mentors down there. From the 10 companies of the cohort, we were the only 2 drone companies that got in. And that was, I think, the starting off our journey of truly, building and accomplishing, going through the pitches and how to pitch and, how do you deal with investors. Just around that time when we did our demo after 2 months of the accelerator, I had my first meeting with the largest VC down in Hong Kong. They had invited us because they were interested in knowing what exactly we were around that time. It was just around 2018. So that was sort of when I realized that this is real now. This is not just something you did at a hackathon. This is something you're getting yourself into is for the next couple of years or more. And that's when I realized, when that first meeting popped up, I was just like, okay, well, this is real now.
What sort of conversations do you have with others in the industry about where it's going?
I was actually having a conversation with somebody from Uber Elevate when I was in Portland. There was a conference at the Intel's headquarters in Hillsborough. And I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but we spoke about the flying taxis in more specific. And I think a lot of these car companies out there are just waiting for the dust to kind of settle down for them to kind of come in. And you can see Hyundai just partnered up with Uber. And this is just the first car company that's just coming into the game. My assumption is we will have drone deliveries that we have been having for the past year, but I think it would be based off on the value of safety and the value of what is being delivered. I mean, if it's an organ being delivered, that sort of runs in the same frequency as safety. And with aviation authorities out there, I think every time when I talk to FAA or Transport Canada, that the first thing for them is safety first. And that's been always on my mind. So I think in the next 10 years, decade, I think anything that goes against safety will probably not be propelled, if anything, if I can use that word. Because of the reason is because people are not going to be okay with it. And if people are not going to be okay with it, the user adoption is going to be lower. VCs are not going to fund it because the sizability is not there. So scalability is not there. So all that comes into play while you're building something out there. So with flying taxis, I think they might be true for certain hotspots, but I can't imagine drones flying around unless we solve that problem first before we get into it. And I think as a founder in the drone space, we've dealt with more regulation changes than we have with VCs. Yeah, that's been quite the challenge. Then recently, if I can add one last thing with regarding this, is I had a young entrepreneur just in his early 20s come up to me and he said that he wanted to build a software around delivery in the social service work, potentially organs and blood. So the one thing I advised him is that because you're in Canada, I would like you to first deal with the regulations and figure out the loopholes so you can so that does not stop you from growing into building something that you're destined to build. And I think regulations are the only thing that could probably stop an entrepreneur right now. Other than that, I think everything is out there. The whole ecosystem is waiting for supporting new technology or new collaborations out there. I mean, except for the consolidations that are happening.
What's the one thing about drone entry that you want to make sure people know?
We wanted to work with the ecosystem. We have never tried to come out as we can do everything. And I think that's one thing I would like to share is that we're always open for partnerships. We're always open to working with the ecosystem because in the end, it's all about working with the ecosystem to provide the solution. Because we've known that a lot of people who've tried to work by themselves haven't really done too well, at least from our observation. So yeah, that's one thing I would say.
And for my final question, Uzayr, what message would you like to leave regarding the role of drone entry in the drone industry?
As we were a single pilot dashboard earlier, and now that we're looking at enterprise, we're actually seriously going after enterprise companies from the Asian side since we were in Hong Kong, as well as the North American side. And knowing that the ERP solution is potentially a key component or an integrator between airspace management tools and data processing tools. We're looking to work with all the UTM companies, since we are not a UTM company, but we want to be able to give the enterprise users the flexibility of interchanging UTMs based on their location. And that's something that we have built within our dashboard to switch between UTMs based on their geographic location, and obviously being agnostic to the type of drone software you use to process your drone data. In other words, it means that we are looking to work with all kinds of drone data processing softwares, and we are looking to provide our ERP solution to their existing user base, since they focus on processing the software. And yeah, same thing with the UTM companies, since they're focused on providing the airspace zoning information. There's definitely some partnership that can be done.
That's it for episode 250 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Uzayr Siddiqui of Drone Entry. I want to thank Uzayr for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Drone Entry or want to connect with Uzayr, check out the webpage at droneentry.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the costs of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.